Welcome to part 2 of Runescape Weekly's PC and Account Security series. In this episode, we will cover Windows Update and why it's important, Secunia PSI, system backups, and antivirus. Let's jump directly into the first part here, which is Windows Update and why it's important. Windows Update is a built-in function of Windows that allows you to receive updates from Microsoft. This function is often overlooked by a lot of people or even turned off outright due to the inconvenience of needing to reboot and possibly wait for patching to take place. This is a huge mistake as these updates often patch critical Windows system vulnerabilities that hackers can use to gain access to your system. Remember, your account is only as secure as the computer you use it on. If your computer has tons of security holes in it, gaining control of your account becomes much easier for an individual to do that has malintent. You can specifically schedule your updates to take place overnight if you are willing to leave your system on overnight, which can alleviate the need to install system updates during normal use. Explanations of how to schedule your Windows Update will be given in the description and tailored to the different types of Windows operating systems. The next major category of update falls under the category of the software you have installed on your operating system. Windows Update is of course the foundation for keeping yourself free of operating system vulnerabilities, but that is unfortunately not good enough. The programs you install on your computer are also a security risk, unfortunately. At the time of recording this, Runescape still uses Java as their main client. Java is one of the largest security risks on the web as it runs in a browser and has the power of a full programming language. Though most major web browsers are phasing out Java support, the threat is still valid. With this being said, keeping all your applications on your system up to date is almost mind-numbing to think about. How could you possibly keep track of newer versions of everything and keep them up to date on a regular basis? In comes Secunia PSI. Secunia PSI, or Personal Software Inspector, is a program that alleviates the need to constantly check for software updates of your various installed programs. Its scan function has the ability to check the update servers of most applications, and in most cases update them with very little user interaction. It will even provide you with a system score, letting you know how up to date your machine is. If your operating system and software are both patched and kept up to date, then your risk of falling victim to an exploit shrinks significantly. A link will be provided to Secunia PSI in the description of this video. Now that we have covered keeping things up to date, it's time to cover a topic not many people like to think about: system backups. It's all fine and dandy to be secure, but let's be real. Planning for the worst possible scenario is always in your best interest, which is why it is important to have a system backup in case of system failure. This becomes even more apparent in the event that you do find yourself with some tricky malware. A clean system backup becomes your best friend when you can't be sure whether or not your antivirus has done the job or not. In most cases, I tell my clients that once a machine is infected, it should never be considered 100% secure ever again. This is a drastic measure to take, and I generally only recommend that to clients with replicating infections or whom operate in high-risk enterprise environments, but if you find yourself in that scenario, you will be happy to have an up-to-date backup ready to restore your operating system to normality. So, what constitutes a good backup? I like to follow the 3-2-1 backup rule. 3 backups stored at least 2 locations per one operating system. This can sound daunting, but can be carried out in many different ways. First off, let's cover local backups. A local backup consists of a hard drive or media that is separate from the target computer we are attempting to create the backup of. This can take the form of an external hard drive, a large flash drive, optical media, or in some cases, even backup tapes. Once you have committed to making a local backup, you have a few different options. You can go with a continuous automatic backup, an off-site backup, or a manual backup. Obviously, a continuous automatic backup sounds like the best choice here. I often recommend these to people who are operating in a standard Windows environment. Most modern external hard drives you purchase will come with software that will back up your important files. This generally includes documents and multimedia. This is generally fine for most people. I will include links to my personal choices of hard drives capable of doing this. The problem here is that for some people that is not enough. Having a backup of important documents and media is great, but what about all of those installed programs? Due to the nature of how operating systems handle themselves, and I will try to keep this basic, programs cannot be carried over in this method. If you are not concerned with reinstalling programs, then this is a great option. The next type of backup to consider is an off-site backup. People don't like to think about this, but in the event of a natural disaster or fire, you may lose your local backup. You probably have more important things to worry about in this scenario, but if your data is truly important to you, you may wish to consider this method. Another reason to consider for off-site backups is the fact that an intruder is less likely to get their hands on it if it is stored at a secure location. I have heard far too many stories that a data theft case was perpetrated by a close friend or relative. By keeping your data off-site, you reduce this risk greatly. I will include a link to an About.com article on online backup services. My personal favorite is Carbonite. I have used it in both enterprise and personal environments, and it is very simple and reliable. I am not being paid or sponsored by Carbonite in any way to say that, I just happen to have a good experience with them, so I figured I would recommend them. Again, you will find a link in the description to a range of online backup services. I suggest you read through this list and find one that works for you. And finally, a manual backup will give you the most flexibility in what data you can keep protected. It is also the most time-intensive, and generally I don't recommend these for the average PC user. But with that being said, a manual backup can give you a much more powerful backup than something like Western Digital's WD Store or Carbonite's off-site backups. This is due to the advanced nature of the applications I will be recommending. My favorite program for the job is Macrium Reflect Free. Macrium Reflect allows for a unique backup option called disk cloning. What that does is exactly what it sounds like. Macrium will make an exact copy of the disk to another disk or file that will allow you to store instances of your hard drive in its entirety. This clone or image can be used to restore your full operating system in a disaster scenario. Keep in mind when you're using the image or clone functionality that the backup then is tied to that specific computer. If you attempt to restore it on a different computer, you are more than likely going to be met with a blue screen of death, so keep that in mind when using this type of backup method. It's only good for the computer that it was created for. I will often recommend that an image or clone be done once a month alongside an offsite or automatic backup for those disciplined enough to take on the task. There are, of course, other solutions to Macrium out there. I encourage you to read up on them if you are looking to familiarize yourself with the idea of creating system images. Now that we have a basic foundation laid for the worst case scenario, let's talk about how to prevent ending up there in the first place. Antivirus is a very important line of defense in keeping your computer secure. Most people know this, but are unsure what to do about it. There are so many choices out there, what works and what doesn't. First off, the most important thing to understand about an antivirus is that it works a lot in the same vein as vaccinations do in humans. Antivirus will attempt to prevent the infection of a virus and most of the time will be successful, or at least partially successful, but there is no guarantee this will be the case 100% of the time. Like human vaccines, an antivirus can also be defeated by a number of different methods. The first thing to be aware of is something referred to as a zero-day exploit. This term is used to define a flaw in a piece of software that is yet to have been remediated by its creator. These are very common in frequently used programs such as Windows, Flash, Java, Skype, etc. This is not necessarily because they are in of themselves insecure, but due to their popularity attract the attention of malicious hackers more often as they have large user bases to potentially exploit. In the event that you are running an application with a zero-day exploit, your antivirus may be powerless during the initial infection and may only be able to clean up the aftermath. Most antivirus companies have a turn time of less than 24 hours for adding detections for new types of infections, but again, depending on the severity of the exploit, the antivirus may only be able to detect the threat after it has emerged on the system and not before. This is not necessarily the antivirus's fault, though it can be very frustrating. We will cover more on anti-exploit techniques in the next episode of our security series. The other main way an antivirus can easily be defeated is when a user accidentally gives the malicious program admin access. Some viruses will disguise themselves as legitimate software. This is often referred to as a Trojan. As soon as you give admin access to a program, you essentially give it the ability to make system changes that could render your antivirus useless. If you are unsure about the integrity of a file before running it, submit it to VirusTotal. VirusTotal will scan a file against a myriad of different antivirus services and give you an overall safety score. Check them out at virustotal.com. If you pride yourself on downloading shading files, consider installing the VirusTotal Uploader. You can scan files with a simple right-click. Hopefully I have now laid the groundwork for antivirus expectations. Antivirus is not an excuse to be unsafe on the internet, just as wearing a seatbelt is not an excuse for reckless driving. We put safety measures in place to save us when we fall into an unscrupulous scenario, not to tempt fate. With that being said, what are some good antivirus choices? Well, let's cover the paid ones first, then the free. My personal recommendation for a paid antivirus client would be Webroot's Secure Anywhere. It is affordable, cross-platform, and extremely lightweight, taking up almost no system resources. They also have one of the best response times to new infections. I will provide a link to them in the description. My runner-up would be AVG Zen or BitDefender Total Security. Both programs are worth the price tag as well, though I still prefer Webroot. Again, I'm not being paid by Webroot to say that, I just have had really good experiences with Webroot in the past, so I'm recommending them here. If you're not willing to pay for antivirus, well, you wouldn't be alone. If you are willing to skimp on some features and customer support, then you can get away with using a free antivirus. For most people, this is enough. If you find yourself constantly in high-risk situations, you may want to consider yourself a professional security suite, however. My main choices for free antivirus generally include AVG Free, BitDefender Free, Avira Free, and Avast Free. I have listed these in the order of how often I tend to recommend them. They all will pretty much do the same thing, and their detection rates are all pretty comparable. AVG can get a bit annoying as it will try to upsell you on occasion, and BitDefender will require you to fork over some personal information to remain free. And Avira and Avast both seem like solid choices in the past few years as well, but have less of a noteworthy history. I figured they were worth mentioning as well. Again, these free solutions will more than likely all provide similar features and protection. It really comes down to which one you find more user-friendly. Remember, never have more than one active antivirus on a computer at once. If you decide you don't like your current provider, always uninstall it before trying another product. There will be links below to different free solutions. Also, before everyone freaks out saying, "Oh my gosh, why didn't you talk about Malwarebytes?" Oh, don't you worry. Malwarebytes is coming. Malwarebytes is not considered antivirus, it's considered anti-malware. So back those fingers away from that keyboard, because we'll talk about that in the next installment of Runescape Weekly's Security Series. That's gonna do it for part 2. I hope you have found this episode useful. We are still paving the groundwork of PC security, so stay tuned for the next part where we cover anti-exploit and mitigation, software firewalls, network intrusion detection, and browser extensions for security and privacy. Thanks for tuning in, and if you enjoy the content we produce, consider supporting us on Patreon. You can find a link in the description. And as always, happy skeeping.